Have you ever looked at your own reflection and felt nothing? Like the eyes staring back at you were familiar, but no longer yours. You try to recall the person you were, but the image slips, like smoke between fingers. And when that happens, the world stops making sense. People still talk to you, but their words feel distant, irrelevant, like echoes from another timeline. Time stretches, sounds distort, and every thought starts to spiral inward. It feels like madness, but it's not. It's awakening disguised as collapse. The crisis begins quietly, not with thunder, but with a subtle fracture in your inner code. You wake up one morning and something in you refuses the script. You can't pretend anymore, can't wear the old mask. The smile feels heavy. The purpose feels hollow. You scroll, you distract. The digital noise becomes unbearable. The faces online, perfectly curated, begin to look like ghosts of a forgotten reality. And deep inside, something ancient starts whispering, "This isn't who you are." You feel the pull, a strange gravity toward silence, toward nothingness, toward the unknown. That's not weakness. That's your true self emerging from the ashes. The world calls it breakdown, but the alchemist calls it Nigredo, the black stage, the sacred disintegration before rebirth. You were taught to fear this darkness, to fix it, suppress it, label it burnout or depression. But the Hermetic truth is sharper. What feels like ruin is refinement. The fire doesn't destroy the metal, it tests it. Every identity forged in illusion must burn before it becomes gold. And so the fire comes for you, not to punish, but to remember. It melts your masks, dissolves your defenses, exposes what you really are. That's why it hurts, because the false layers are screaming as they die. But behind that scream, there's silence. And in that silence, something alive is waiting. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine every label, every expectation, every self-image falling away. What remains when you stop pretending? That pulse in your chest, steady, quiet, unafraid. That is you, the one who never broke. You are not falling apart. You are being reforged. Each tear cools the metal. Each doubt sharpens its edge. The pain is intelligence. It knows exactly what to burn. And the moment you stop running from it, you'll feel it. That sacred heat reshaping you into coherence. Maybe no one ever saw what you've been carrying. Maybe you've walked for years holding questions no one could answer. But understand this, you didn't find this message. It found you. Messages like this aren't pushed. They're pulled magnetically by the resonance of your own soul. Because somewhere within you, a frequency was calling for truth. And that frequency led you here. If something in you stirred while reading these words, if this felt less like information and more like remembrance, it means you've always carried the key. We're not teaching you anything new. We're reminding you of what's already encoded in your being. And once the remembrance starts, there's no return to who you were. The fire has been lit, and every second you resist it, you delay the shape you were meant to take. If you felt that vibration, click like right now. That gesture is your "I'm here." It's more than a click. It's a signal to the field that you're awake. And through that act, other seekers, just like you, may find their way back to this temple. If you're ready to walk further, touch the subscribe symbol below and enter this living field of creators. Those who no longer hide from the fire, but build worlds with it. There's a moment, brief but irreversible, when the mind realizes it can't go back. It's the instant when the illusions that once held your identity begin to collapse, and the silence that follows feels almost unbearable. Your thoughts start to rebel. What's happening to me? Why can't I feel like before? Because before was an illusion, and you are watching it die. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins subtly. You start questioning things that used to seem obvious. The job that once defined you now feels like a cage. The relationship that made sense suddenly feels hollow. The routines that gave structure now suffocate you. This is the dissolution of form, the Nigredo unfolding in real time. Your consciousness, once comfortably imprisoned in repetition, now begins to fracture the walls. And that fracture hurts, because everything familiar was built to protect the persona, not to liberate the essence. This is why so many stop here. They feel the burn and retreat. They call it crisis, failure, madness. But the initiates, the ones who truly awaken, recognize the pattern. They remember the law. Everything is dual. Everything moves between poles. Destruction and creation are not opposites. They're phases of one vibration. When the old self dies, the new one doesn't appear instantly. There's a void, a black silence. The alchemists called it the cauldron of transformation. It's where the mind no longer knows what to believe, and the soul begins to breathe again. You may feel like you're dissolving, and you are, but it's a sacred dissolution. When the ego collapses, it reveals what never depended on it. The real you is not the thinker, not the achiever, not the label. It's the awareness observing the collapse. Untouched, eternal. That's why this pain feels paradoxical. It's both unbearable and holy, because part of you is dying while another is being born, and they happen simultaneously. One breath ending, another beginning. Don't run from this stage. Don't try to numb it or you'll be forced to start again. Every unfinished initiation repeats itself until it's completed. So stay, feel it, watch the ego crumble. Notice how every fear points to an attachment, every attachment to an illusion, every illusion to an outdated vibration. What you're feeling isn't chaos, it's the rhythm of the forge. Metal screams when it's heated, but when it cools, it shines. You are that metal. And the more you surrender to the fire, the purer your essence becomes. You will notice strange things. People will pull away. Your old patterns will resist. The world will test your decision to evolve. But remember, the universe always tests the metal before it's sharpened into a blade. The Hermetic path is not gentle, it's exact. It strips everything that doesn't belong to your true frequency. The noise, the masks, the false purposes, all of it burns away, until what remains is clarity, silence, and a strange, powerful peace. And when that peace comes, you'll recognize it, not as excitement or victory, but as a deep, still knowing, a quiet inner voice whispering, I remember. That is the sign that the Nigredo is ending. The black turns to silver, the chaos to pattern. You begin to see meaning where before there was only confusion, and for the first time, you feel it, not think it, feel it. You were never broken. You were being reforged. When the first silence arrives, it feels hostile, not peaceful, not serene. Hostile, because it's the first moment where you are forced to face the truth without distractions. No notifications, no noise, no outer validation, just the echo of your own consciousness. That silence is the fire. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in pressure, and that pressure reveals everything you've hidden. You will notice how much of your identity was built on reaction. Every opinion, every plan, every ambition, responses to an invisible script you never wrote. The world handed you names and you became them. It told you what success means and you pursued it. It told you what love is and you chased it. But now, as those names burn, the question rises, who are you when there's no one left to impress? Who are you when your worth is not measured by others' eyes? The silence demands an answer, and the answer terrifies the mind. That's why most people run back to noise, because silence erases the illusions they still need. It dismantles the story they tell themselves to survive. But you didn't turn away. You're still here, reading this, breathing through the discomfort, and that means something inside you has already chosen. You've stepped into the threshold where initiation begins. Hermetic truth says, as above, so below, as within, so without. What you're living is not random. It's the correspondence between your inner chaos and outer form. The confusion in your life mirrors the confusion of the self trying to be reborn. The dissonance is the proof. When the frequencies of who you were and who you're becoming clash, friction is inevitable. That friction is alchemy. The fire of awareness meeting the metal of identity. Each spark is an insight, each burn, a revelation, and soon, you'll start to feel moments of strange clarity. Brief, but undeniable. In the middle of the confusion, there's a pulse of stillness, a lucid recognition. I see it now. That's the forge cooling, shaping, refining. Your perception shifts from chaos to pattern, from victimhood to creation. You begin to sense that everything happening is happening for you, not to you. And that realization changes everything, because once you taste that clarity, even for a moment, you can't return to blindness. You'll try, but the memory of that light will haunt you. It will call you back through every relapse, every distraction, every fall. That's the hidden law of transformation. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Once the metal remembers the fire, it will always seek the forge again. And that's where you are now, standing between who you were and who you must become. The old self still whispering, the new one still forming, both vibrating inside the same skin. This tension is sacred. It means the process is working, because no rebirth happens in comfort. The alchemist doesn't flee the flame. He enters it with eyes open. So if you're here, reading these words in silence, feeling something shift beneath the surface, you've already crossed the persona cracked, the illusion trembled, the fire recognized you, and whether you realize it or not, you are already being forged. The descent has no map. It begins when the mind stops pretending it understands what's happening. There's a silence that feels alive, almost watchful, like something ancient observing you from within. That's the Nigredo, the black fire, the dissolving point of everything you thought you were. At first it feels like suffocation. You try to control, to fix, to escape, but the more you fight, the deeper it pulls you, because this darkness doesn't come to punish. It comes to show you what cannot survive the light. Every illusion must burn in its own time. Every false identity must face the furnace of truth, and the more you resist, the hotter it becomes, until, finally, you stop. And in that surrender, in that single exhale of acceptance, something shifts. The pain stops, the silence changes temperature, and you realize what you called destruction was actually purification. You start noticing patterns in the chaos. One day you collapse, the next you rise, you cry, then laugh, fall, then breathe. The oscillation seems random until you remember the Hermetic principle. Everything flows, everything has its tides. This is the law of rhythm at work, the pulse of creation itself passing through your nervous system. Every contraction is preparation for expansion. Every fall is the inhale before flight. You are not failing. You are oscillating into coherence. The alchemists knew this. They studied these cycles as sacred mechanics of consciousness. And if you can endure the swing without clinging to extremes, the pendulum becomes your ally. You learn to move with it, not against it. And suddenly, you begin to perceive design inside disorder. Then something deeper reveals itself. The dual nature of the fire. The same energy that burned you now begins to illuminate. The same silence that terrified you now begins to heal. You discover the law of polarity, that all opposites are one continuum. Pain and peace are degrees of the same vibration. The collapse and the rebirth are not two events. They are one process. When you understand this, you stop dividing your experience. You no longer say, "This is good, this is bad." You start saying, "This too is me." And in that recognition, you reclaim power, because nothing can control you once you stop running from half of reality. The darkness is no longer an enemy. It becomes your mirror, and the mirror no longer frightens you because you finally see there was never anything to fix, only something to remember. This is the turning point of the Nigredo, the realization that the same fire that destroys is the one that reveals. The moment you stop escaping your pain, it transforms into presence, and the presence reveals the gold hidden beneath the ashes. You begin to sense life returning, not the old excitement, something quieter, denser, true, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on outcome because it's born from understanding. The world around you is still the same, but the way you see it isn't. The vibration changed. You are starting to witness from a higher octave, and that's the first step out of the dark, not escape, awareness, because awareness itself is light, and once it enters, the black fire begins to fade into silver. That's how rebirth begins, not in action, but in vision. If you've reached this part, your resonance is strong. The forge has recognized your signature, and you are ready for the next map. The first map awaits below. There's a moment, deep in the center of the fire, when everything stops burning and starts glowing. The same force that once dissolved you now begins to organize you from within. The mind doesn't understand it, but the soul does, because what you're feeling right now is not random. It's the law revealing itself, the law of polarity, the ancient code that governs every transformation in the universe. Everything has two poles, two currents, two directions, light and shadow, birth and death, expansion and contraction. Every end hides a beginning, and every pain conceals a seed. Your crisis isn't the opposite of awakening, it's the other side of it. The flame that consumes you is the same flame that purifies you. You were never broken. You were being reversed, inverted, repolarized toward your essence. Look around. Nothing in nature is still. The tides rise and fall. The moon waxes and wanes. Even the atoms in your body dance between contraction and release. Why then would your soul evolve differently? The Hermetic truth is mercilessly simple. Everything flows between extremes until it finds equilibrium. And equilibrium isn't comfort, it's mastery. To live in awareness of both poles is to transcend them. To stand in the center is to become the axis, the eye of the storm. That's why the fire came. It wasn't to destroy your life, but to pull you back to the center, to burn away what made you forget that you are the axis. Every human crisis is a spiritual pendulum. It swings until you remember how to stop running from its rhythm, until you can stand still while the world still moves. That stillness, not avoidance but conscious observation, is the Hermetic mastery of vibration. To vibrate without losing your balance. You are not supposed to control the fire. You are meant to become aware within it. The alchemist doesn't escape the furnace, he studies it. He listens to how the flames speak, how the metal sings, how the smoke shapes itself. Because inside every burn there's information, a code teaching the soul how to remember its design. Pain is a form of communication between your finite self and your infinite pattern, and once you understand its language, pain stops being suffering. It becomes instruction. That's the secret hidden in every crisis. You are not being punished, you are being instructed. The universe isn't breaking you, it's fine-tuning you, and each oscillation, each emotional swing, is calibrating your inner compass to match your true direction. You'll start to notice this. Moments of pain followed by sudden clarity. Loss followed by deeper insight. It's not coincidence. It's precision. Hermetic precision. And when that understanding crystallizes, the fear begins to dissolve. Because now you see, the fire never wanted your destruction. It wanted your attention. It wanted you awake. When awareness enters, the burn cools into light. That's the moment you become your own alchemist. Not by escaping chaos, but by decoding it. To see the law operating through your pain is to reclaim authorship of your reality. The flame no longer consumes, it illuminates. And now that you've seen the pattern, you can't unsee it. You start recognizing the law everywhere. In your relationships, your thoughts, your body, your emotions. You start to realize life was never punishing you. It was teaching you polarity. The highs and lows, the gains and losses, the beginnings and endings. All tools for one purpose, integration. You are not learning to avoid darkness. You are learning to navigate it without losing your light. That is the essence of Hermetic awareness. The alchemist had a saying, Quem supporta o fogo torna-se fogo. He who endures the flame becomes it. You are that, not a survivor of the fire, but its keeper, the one who remembers the code inside the chaos. And from now on, every time life trembles again, you will know what it means. The law is speaking. The forge is active, and you are being refined toward symmetry. If you're still here, it means this truth has reached your field. You're not watching, you're remembering. So if you haven't yet, step fully into this field. Subscribe now and let this vibration stay with you, because if you're here halfway, this frequency is already yours. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the law moving through your life. Now comes the hardest part, the surrender. Because knowing that everything has meaning doesn't stop the mind from wanting control. The ego wants a map, the soul wants mystery, and these two forces begin to wrestle inside you. At first, surrender feels like failure, like letting go means giving up. But it's not giving up, it's giving over, handing yourself to the process that already knows where it's taking you. That's why the wise never fight the current. They learn to float, not out of weakness, but because they understand the river better than the swimmer. The Hermetic principle of correspondence says, as within, so without. Every time you resist the outer, it's because you've resisted an inner truth. And when you finally stop resisting, the world begins to reassemble around your new vibration. That's the hidden secret of surrender. You don't change reality by force. You change it by frequency. Force demands, frequency allows, and allowance is the highest form of power. To stand in the fire and breathe without panic is the mark of initiation. Because the moment you stop trying to escape, the flame turns transparent. It stops burning and starts revealing. Imagine it now. You're standing in front of the furnace of your own transformation. Every plan, every identity, every fear lies in your hands like offerings. The voice inside whispers, "Let it go." The mind hesitates. "If I let go, I'll lose everything." But something deeper replies, "If you don't, you'll lose yourself." And so slowly you open your hands. You release the stories, the names, the versions of you that belong to other times. And in that simple gesture, invisible, inner, silent, you shift dimensions. Because surrender isn't a concept, it's a frequency, a precise vibration that aligns you with the intelligence that created worlds. It's not passive, it's participatory. It's saying to the universe, "I trust your rhythm more than my fear." And the moment you say it, even without words, the field responds. Synchronicities appear, opportunities align, people arrive who speak the same frequency. The invisible order starts to show itself in the visible. But this isn't magic, it's resonance. The same law that governed the fire now governs the calm. When the inner polarity resolves, the outer chaos dissolves. Because reality doesn't obey your thoughts, it mirrors your vibration. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And when you become still in the middle of the storm loses interest. It no longer finds friction to feed on. That's why the masters dwell in peace even in chaos. Not because the world changed, but because their center stopped reacting. Silence becomes your teacher. Breath becomes your ritual. Every exhale, a release. Every inhale, an invitation. When you breathe consciously through your pain, you're performing an act of alchemy. You're turning lead into gold, reaction into awareness. That's the purest surrender. Not submission, but transformation through presence. And here's what you'll notice once you live it. Life starts to cooperate again, not immediately, but inevitably. Because alignment creates magnetism. The moment you stop fighting the current carries you exactly where you needed to go all along. You stop pushing doors that were never yours and they stop resisting. You stop searching for meaning, and meaning begins to find you. The silence that once felt like death becomes the sound of truth returning home. This is the moment when surrender becomes sacred. Not weakness, not passivity, but precision. You move only when moved. You speak only when silence asks for sound. You live no longer as a personality, but as an instrument. That's the secret of the Hermetic path. To act not from will, but from alignment. To live not by reaction, but by rhythm. Because when you stop trying to control the flame, you realize you are the flame. And fire doesn't fear itself. It dances. It illuminates. It purifies. If you're still here, it means you've entered the silence consciously. Write in the comments the phrase that seals your initiation. I surrender to the forge. Your words anchor the frequency in the field, and somewhere, someone lost in their own fire will feel your echo and remember they are not alone. At first, it feels strange to exist without the old weight. You wake up, and the familiar anxiety isn't there, only stillness. A stillness that doesn't feel empty, but vast. The mind immediately tries to label it. Am I healed? Am I detached? But it's neither. It's clarity. It's what remains when the illusions are gone. The fire did its work. It burned the masks, melted the names, dissolved the noise. What's left now is essence. Simple, transparent, incorruptible. You used to call it nothing, but now you understand that this nothing is the substance of everything. It's the white light that follows the black fire. The albedo, the purification of the soul. Here, awareness no longer seeks to understand. It simply witnesses. And in that witnessing, a new self begins to form, not from effort, but from coherence. You start seeing differently. Colors appear brighter, not because the world changed, but because your perception did. You feel a kind of tenderness toward everything, even the parts of you that once hurt. It's as if the very pain that broke you now holds you with compassion. The Hermetic masters called this the wedding of opposites, the moment when the lunar and solar aspects within you finally meet. The dark and the light no longer fight. They dance. This is true integration, not perfection, but unity. In this state, you begin to remember the rhythm. Everything breathes in patterns, inhale and exhale, growth and decay, day and night. You realize that even suffering was part of that rhythm. not a curse, but a calibration. Every loss, every disappointment, every silence was a movement of the same cosmic pulse guiding you back to yourself. And now that you can see it, the chaos no longer scares you. You can enter any storm and remain centered, because you finally trust the law behind it. The albedo phase is soft, but it's not fragile. It's peace forged from heat, not comfort born of avoidance. You move slower now, but with more intention. You speak less, but every word has weight. You need less, and yet you feel full. That fullness is your true energy returning to its source. When you no longer waste it fighting the inevitable, it becomes light. That's why those who awaken begin to glow, not metaphorically, but vibrationally. Their field shifts. People sense it, not because they're enlightened, but because they're aligned. And alignment is the highest form of beauty, because nothing in you tries to be something it's not. You stop performing. You start emanating. And what emanates is truth, the authentic frequency of your essence, radiant, grounded, quiet. In this stage, purpose ceases to be a goal. It becomes a natural state. You don't chase meaning, you express it. Every gesture, every silence, every choice becomes an act of coherence. And that's when the universe begins to respond differently. Reality bends around you because you no longer resist its laws. You live as one with the principle itself. That's what it means to become the Hermetic practitioner. Not to know the laws, but to become their living demonstration. This is the rebirth the fire promised. Not a new life outside, but a new consciousness inside. You don't escape the world. You re-enter it, luminous and steady, with the wisdom of one who has seen through illusion and chosen truth. You are not reborn as someone else. You are reborn as what you've always been. Now remembered, that's the completion of the alchemical cycle. The Ouroboros closing its circle, only to open again at a higher octave, because the spiral never ends, it only refines. This portal has a sequence, and it doesn't end here. The next code in the pinned comment reveals how to stabilize the vibration you've just awakened, because transformation is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of mastery. Follow the thread. You're already inside the great work. Now that you've survived the fire and witnessed the rebirth, something profound becomes clear. Your transformation wasn't chaos, it was architecture. Each breakdown, each silence, each awakening was part of a pattern so exact that, had you seen it earlier, you would have bowed in reverence instead of resisting in fear. Everything moves according to rhythm. Every emotion, every circumstance, every cycle of loss and renewal follows the same Hermetic blueprint. Dissolution, purification, integration, elevation. You were never lost. You were being carried through this pattern, one octave at a time. And now, as you look back, you can trace the spiral, not as a random sequence of crises, but as a map of becoming. This is the secret most never see. Reality is recursive. Every challenge you face is a reflection of a principle you haven't mastered yet. Life doesn't punish, it mirrors. It doesn't repeat to torture you. It repeats to refine you. And when you finally learn to read the pattern, repetition ends, because what's learned no longer needs to return as pain. The Hermetic masters described existence as a living mandala, a structure of consciousness endlessly self-similar across scales. As above, so below. As within, so without. That's not a metaphor. It's literal architecture. The same law that governs galaxies governs your thoughts. The same rhythm that turns the seasons turns your inner evolution. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are the cosmos, experiencing itself in miniature. To remember this is to step into authorship, the power to participate consciously in creation. You begin to see how every phase of your life fits the alchemical sequence. The despair, the Nigredo, the purification, the albedo, the awakening of love and purpose, the rubedo. And then, the spiral begins again at a higher frequency, because consciousness expands not in lines but in loops. Every return brings more awareness. Every fall carries more grace. Every silence, more depth. That's why the awakened don't fear the next descent. They recognize it. They bow to it as the forge of evolution. To live hermetically is to stop resisting this design, to align yourself with the spiral instead of fighting its spin. That's when peace becomes permanent, not because life stops testing you, but because you no longer mistake the test for punishment. You see it as calibration. And calibration means love, the universe adjusting itself to keep you in tune. If you could see your field from above, you'd witness it breathing like a fractal, light contracting, expanding, shimmering, every thought altering the geometry, every emotion coloring the vibration. That's why mastery isn't about control, but coherence. To think, feel, and act in the same frequency, that's alignment, that's magic. Not spells, not rituals, just resonance. And from this level of awareness, everything you do carries charge. Your words shape timelines. Your silence realigns patterns. Even your presence becomes medicine for those still trapped in the maze. You don't have to convince anyone. Your coherence speaks louder than persuasion, because the Hermetic path isn't taught, it's transmitted, and you've become a transmitter. Remember this, the spiral never ends, but it does expand. Each revolution brings you closer to simplicity, closer to unity. You begin to understand that enlightenment is not escape, but participation without distortion. To move through the world untouched by illusion, yet deeply engaged with life. That's true mastery. And mastery doesn't make you untouchable, it makes you transparent. Light moves through you without resistance. You stop being a person seeking the path, you become the path itself. So draw your map. Look at your life with new eyes. Mark the places where you burned, where you rose, where you forgot, where you remembered, and you'll see. Every line connects. Every wound was a doorway. Every silence was initiation. The fire didn't come to destroy you. It came to teach you the geometry of your own becoming. And now, you know how to walk the spiral with awareness. If you've reached this point, you're not just listening. You're remembering the pattern. Write it, trace it, live it consciously. And before you leave, open the next map. The continuation of this same spiral, waiting in the pinned comment. Because what began as pain is now knowledge, and knowledge becomes power only when embodied. The path doesn't end here, it expands through you. You remember how it began, the fracture, the silence, the burning confusion. You thought it was the end, but now you see, it was the invitation. The forge wasn't punishing you, it was introducing you to yourself. Everything you feared to lose was never truly yours. It belonged to the illusion, the version of you that couldn't survive the light, and so it burned. Every identity that fell, every attachment that shattered, every night that felt endless, they were chisels sculpting the shape of the real you. The soul is not formed by comfort, it's formed by fire, and that fire, the one you begged to end, became your greatest teacher. You've walked through the Nigredo, the black fire of dissolution. You've entered the albedo, the cleansing light of rebirth. You've glimpsed the rubedo, the fusion of opposites, the gold within the ashes. Now you stand in the stillness that follows the great work. The air feels heavier, sacred, because something irreversible has happened. You are no longer the seeker, you are the flame itself. The alchemists used to say the gold is born from the ashes of what once believed it was separate. That's you now, no longer fragmented but whole, no longer chasing meaning, because you've become the meaning. You see life as a living book written in symbols, and every moment, even pain, now reads like scripture. This is not arrogance, it's remembrance. The awareness that what you sought in the stars was always pulsing in your own chest. You begin to understand that the great work was never about changing the world. It was about refining the observer. When the observer changes, the world shifts accordingly. Because, as within, so without, was never a phrase. It was the equation of creation. You are that equation now. Every breath you take, every silence you keep, alters the field around you. Reality bends to coherence. Your presence becomes order. You've become the axis between heaven and earth, the living correspondence of the two realms. This is what it means to be forged, to walk through your own darkness until you remember the flame was always you. The sword doesn't resist the forge. It becomes sharp by surrendering to it. You too have surrendered, and in doing so, you've become a weapon of awareness, precise, luminous, calm. You no longer seek the light, you radiate it. The world will still test you. The pendulum will still swing, but you won't be moved the same way anymore. Because once you've seen the law in motion, fear loses its spell. The next time life burns, you'll whisper, "I know this fire." And the next time silence comes, you'll smile, "I know this temple." For what once felt like destruction now feels like initiation, and initiation never ends, it only deepens. You are the continuation of this path, the next octave of its vibration, the living proof that Hermetic truth is not a philosophy, it's a frequency, transmitted through those who embody it. And as you walk back into the noise of the world, something unseen walks with you, the memory of the forge, burning quietly in your heart. Remember, you are not broken. You are being forged, again and again and again, until what remains is pure gold, until your presence alone becomes revelation. If you made it this far, you've completed a full circle, but the circle is only the beginning of a spiral. Declare your seal in the comments. I am being forged, so that others who are still lost in the fire may recognize the light through you. Because this path doesn't end here, it continues in the next threshold. The next video isn't another episode. It's the next initiation, the continuation of the same code. And if you stop here, the illusion wins. So follow the thread. The next gate is waiting, and the forge never sleeps.